Okay. It looks like we're broadcasting.
Display for us? If it's too much of a, not too much.
I will do that for you. There we go. That's the Chrome window. Share. And how about I plug it in? What do you think?
All right, that video that you posted on Facebook the other day, was that actually you singing?
The one I posted last night?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, wow.
Was
you playing the guitar too?
It was. I got home and I was bored. I hadn't played guitar in a couple of days. So.
All right, you and me. I got the ukulele, you got the guitar. We're gonna make this happen, man.
Yeah?
That'll be fun.
Let's do it. I'm down.
I got a ukulele for Christmas. I learned how to play it on my mission, and then it's been 2 years since my parents got me.
Yeah?
So.
Yeah, I have a ukulele back in Arizona somewhere. I just don't know where it is anymore. Just do a mirror display. Take it down.
I found the app for my smartphone that'll help me tune the ukulele.
Yeah.
Longest time by ear to try and get it right. And then I found the app and I was like, done. It just plays and it tells me the note and like where it's red or green, whatever. It's just tuning it.
Okay. I want a mirror. Wait, what's going on? Why?
Did you get it?
Oh, primary. Built-in display is the primary, and that's going to be at 1024. Apply. There we go.
Whoa, why do you make it like that?
What's up?
Oh, is it because you didn't want the top stuff to be done?
Oh, I have to change my resolution to 1024 by 768 on this guy in order to mirror my display over here because this is an older projector and doesn't go any higher than that. Unfortunately. Now I can mirror this. There we go. Now let's see if it's still seeing everything right. Okay, good. Too many windows. Okay. Basically, I have everything up at this website already. Should be called Parse String. It's kind of a crazy name, but I don't really care too much. Pardon me. Localstorage.html. There we go. So if you want to go to this page, you can do the same thing. This is my little test zone. So I actually added a benefit. So I'm going to be going over JSON Parse, JSON Stringify, and those are two methods that exist inside your JavaScript interpreter, inside your browser. And actually, it exists inside the Node.js interpreter as well. So if you ever wanted to mess around with Parse and Stringify, that exists in Node as well. And they actually added a little extra in here because local storage actually kind of it became interesting. And when I started messing with my code and everything, and putting everything together, I'm like, hey, this would actually be fun to add some local storage stuff in here and kind of see how everything is working a little bit better. So I actually did a little bit of local storage here. So we're going to kind of have 2 lessons kind of in one. There's probably more to local storage than I saw, but from what I understand, most of the people that were using local storage were pretty much using it in one specific way. Like there's basically 2 methods you need to know about. Get item and set item, but I'll kind of go over those in a few minutes. I'm just kind of explaining why I was throwing everything together. So first of all, let me type in something. Favorite Madonna song. Well, everybody's favorite Madonna song is Like a Virgin. Or no, let's do Vogue. Because why not? Favorite Madonna pose? Well, Vogue. Why not? Because that's also a pose. Favorite Madonna husband? Let's do Sean Penn. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to store that. So what I'm doing with that button is I'm actually I'm calling that special local storage method to store to store a little bit of information, basically. So what is being stored is those three values, and I'm actually using the JSON Parse and Stringify methods to store those in kind of like a cookie sort of thing. You guys know what cookies are, right? Now, I don't know if the local storage uses cookies. I understand it uses either cookies or something very much like cookies, but what you need to understand is it's storing it locally on the machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click retrieve, and you can see favorite song, pose, husband, Sean Penn. That's all there. The interesting, I mean, that doesn't really mean much to you until I close the tab, and all of that information should be gone. I'm going to go back to that page. I'm going to click retrieve, and it's still there. If you do the same thing on your system right now, I don't know if you've typed in that extraordinarily long URL, but you can do the same thing, and you're going to get different values. You're not going to get my same values because those are just stored on my machine. So it's kind of a cool little setup. Local storage is only meant for client-side JavaScript, so that's in your browser. It's not meant for server-side, so you won't be able to use local storage in Node.js if you were going to try to toy around with stuff. But now let me actually show you the code. Let's actually make it more. Let's actually make it interesting. Let me screen share my entire desktop now. That way I can swipe between screens. Okay, so let me show you the code for this. It's not honestly very complicated. So the very first thing that I did was I created a very basic object at the top that just had three little member properties. So you have song, pose, and husband, and they're attached to the favorites object, basically, whatever it gets instantiated to. And then I have a function down here where I'm actually creating a new version, I'm actually instantiating a new object using the favorites constructor. And then what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the values from the song, the pose, and the husband fields on the web page. I'm storing those into the new object that I just grabbed. So I'm pulling information and stuff that we did last time that we met, talking about objects and everything, so you can see them actually being used here. So I'm storing those values in there. And now what I'm doing is I'm using Stringify. Now let me tell you what Stringify does. You guys know what JSON is? Are you kind of familiar with JSON much at all? Okay. Well, let me write it on the board. We won't be able to see this on camera, but I don't think that's terribly important. We can always just find some websites. But basically, JSON is kind of a format of storing data. You know what XML is? XML is basic. You know how like what HTML looks like? XML looks very much like that, except you have little tags and elements that you're creating for yourself. So instead of having like an A tag, you can have a tag or an element that says, I don't know, pose or last name or something. If you were making an XML document about personal information about a human being, you could have a first name, a last name, and all these other elements and everything. JSON is another way to store data that's kind of like XML, and the way, kind of how you can store data in whatever way you want. It's just kind of it's a concept more than anything. There's nothing really fancy or special about JSON. It's just a concept and a nice, easy way to kind of format the data. And JSON is also the current standard that everybody's adopting for just about everything right now. So basically what JSON looks like is it starts with an opening curly brace and ends with a closing curly brace, as you might expect. And then you, actually I'm gonna do this in one line because it might actually look more confusing than several. So, and we can store key value pairs and stuff inside this thing. So that's the basic, most simple construct inside JSON is a key value pair sort of thing. So let's say that we have an A, which is our key. And then let's say we wanted to store the number, I don't know, 3. So we want to map the number 3 to the key A. Yeah.
Could you put a variable inside of there?
Like the value of a variable?
Or in a sense, yeah, but like just put the variable in there because you're not 100% sure at the current moment what's going to be put into the variable. And so, but you want that variable to be put into the JSON. Could you put a variable?
Yes, kind of. So I guess something that I'll try to clarify here is, by the way, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So this was actually a format that was designed originally for JavaScript and has been adopted for lots of other languages. So there's two things, two formats of JSON that you have to understand. There's the actual JSON object stuff that you can use inside JavaScript. You can actually store, you can be a little bit more free to put variables and stuff in there as willy-nilly without having to do string concatenation and stuff. But then there's JSON as a string, which is literally just a string with characters. I mean, exactly like in C++ and everything. It's not a special data type or anything at that moment in time. It's just a string worth of stuff. And I'm actually telling this for a reason because that'll help you kind of understand Stringify and parse. So if you were to, yes, you can store the value of a variable in there. And then throughout your code, you can change the value. If your JSON is currently a string at the time, you have to concatenate the value in with the rest of the string, which is clunky and gross. So what you could do instead is you can use JSON's parse. And what JSON parse is going to do is it's going to work its way through the string, and it's going to convert a string JSON into an actual JSON object inside JavaScript. And then what you can do is you can actually access the actual value here. So actually, let me open up Node really quick, and I'll actually show you how that looks. So let's make a new thingy. Actually, I'll actually do Stringify right now. Why not? I'm sorry, I'll do parse right now. So let's do let's call this variable JSON string, and let's do the exact example we have up on the board. A3. Now what we need to do is we need to put everything inside quotes because it's a string, and we're going to store that. There's no return value, so obviously undefined is seen there. If we want, what's up?
On your screen, it's projector.
Oh yeah, it's there, I promise. Actually, even on my screen, it's pretty dark. But basically, let me show you what I'm going to try to do, and I'll show you why it doesn't work, and then I'll show you what we can do to make it work. So normally, what you would be able to do is you'd be able to type the key of the value that you want, kind of like an associative array that we were talking about last time, where you could use a string as a key as opposed to an index number. So because we called our key over here A, you would expect over here on the screen, we would be able to use A as our index in our associative array to grab the number 3 out of our JSON, right? So let's throw this inside console.log so we get a little bit more pretty output. Okay, but you're going to see undefined is there. Reason being is it's not a JSON object yet. It's still a JSON string. So there's no way for it to know anything what we were trying to do. It's just like there's no data type here. I don't know how to look for A. It's a string. What do you want me to do? So what we can do now, and what I'll call this is I'll just call this variable just JSON by itself. And what I'll do is I'll call, by the way, this is the method that we're going to be using is kind of like a static method in other languages. We can call the main JSON object, kind of like we were calling from a library that's already been imported. And then we can use parse. And what we pass into parse is the string in JSON format that we want to turn into an actual JSON object. Press enter there, no return value, but also no error. So that means that we must have done something. Now, but look what I can do. So we have that new JSON object variable. We're looking for that the value that's at key string A, character A, and see if we can pull 3 out now. So that's kind of showing you the difference between a JSON string and a JSON object. A JSON object is actually a data type inside JavaScript you can actually do things with. You can iterate through and you can grab things out of it very easily. A JSON string is just a string in JSON format. You can use the JSON string, you can send it across a network, you can use it to store information using local storage and everything, but you still have to turn it back into a JSON object inside JavaScript to do anything really useful with it without having to do a bunch of string concatenation and making it gross. So does that kind of make sense? Please ask questions if it doesn't, because this is the time to do it. Yeah.
So you're parsing the string. So at the very beginning, in a sense, you're putting the variable, you're making A3. Makes sense?
Yeah, so you're storing the value 3 to, or you're attaching it to key A. Yes.
And then later on, what you're doing is you're creating a variable of JSON. And you're using JSON and parsing JSON string, which in a sense is, that's actually putting 3 as A. So that way later on when you do console log JSON A, it will grab A, display it, which is 3, so it displays the 3.
Yeah,
In a roundabout, confusing way to explain it. That's
it's one of those concepts that's deceptively simple, but it's also very easy to overcomplicate. JSON object is actually a data type that you can actually do things with, and you can actually access members inside the object and everything, like I just did, where I was able to grab the number 3 out of key A, basically, out of that spot in your associative array, kind of. Whereas with the string, you couldn't do that because it doesn't know what to do with it. It's just a string. It's just a bunch of characters strung together. And like when I tried to do the console log up there with the JSON string and not the JSON object, and I was looking for the value at key A, JavaScript interpreter's like, this is a string. What do you mean? There's no array. There's nothing to do that. So then I was able to use JSON Parse and try not to confuse parse and stringify, because those are, you kind of have to think about those to try to make sure you know which one's doing what, because I get confused with it. I think I might be mildly dyslexic, but parse is like in any other language. You're going through a particular thing, usually a string, one character at a time, going through it, and you're looking for something, or you're turning that something into something else. So parse, you're passing in a string to make a JSON object, and stringify, you're taking a JSON object and you're turning it into a string. So a JSON object is only useful inside JavaScript. You can't send a JSON object across a network to something else and have it use it. So let's say that you have a Python program on a server or something, and it takes in JSON and it goes through it and it takes information out, right? Now let's say that you have you're from your client machine, you're creating a JSON object in your browser or whatever, and you want to send the JSON information across to the Python server, and the Python is going to go through it and parse it and do whatever. Now, you can't send a JSON object across the network because you just can't. It's a data type that exists inside the interpreter. I mean, it's not a string. And so there's just no way to type it out and push it across the network. Plus, even if you could, Python would have no idea what to do with it. Python has a similar type of construct to a JSON object that actually looks exactly like a JSON object, but it isn't. It's its own data type. However, a JSON string you can send across the network. You can type a JSON string out in Notepad and everything, and you can send that across the network, and then Python can go through and parse it in its own way, and then turn it into its own JSON-like data type, and then it can use it just how JavaScript does. So try to separate the concept of the JavaScript object as a data type and then the JSON string itself. Did you have a question, Taku?
How does it use us to A instead of constant?
It wouldn't do anything. Well, I'll show you what it does. Oh, what it is, but it'll fail out. Basically, because the key is a string. So this is the what's the word I'm looking for? It's just a standard format. You put the key inside quote marks. That's just kind of the standard. So yeah.
So you have only A and 3, and you have multiple information.
Okay. So yes, good question. So basically, what you can do inside JSON,
Make it like an associated array.
you can store an array in here.
Oh,
So, and you can make it an associative array. So you can actually store another JSON object inside that, like another JSON object type sort of thing. So I'm gonna do an array first, and then I'll show you what something else would look like. So then we can store just a basic array, 0, 1, 5 in there. Now when we would access this particular part of our JSON object, the A part, we would actually spit out this array. So actually, I'm actually gonna write another version down here. It's kind of like this, but using kind of an associative array, kind of like what I think you're talking about. Let's call this one B. You can actually stick another one in here. Yeah. I'm trying to make sure I don't confuse myself. Let's call it C. Let's be really creative. And then let's put 4 in here. So you could actually do that, and you have like infinite amount of nesting options inside your JSON string or JSON object. So it's a really awesome format for storing data and everything. It's a lot more simple than writing XML because XML has a lot of extra garbage that just doesn't need to be there. There's a lot of extra typing. This is easier to read for a lot more people. So JSON's kind of become the standard. Yeah.
So if you did a console log JSON beep in display C,
it would display the object that kind of is inside it. So actually, let's actually do that. Let's call this one. Let's call it JSON, the name. Let's actually make a new thing. So I'll kind of try to follow what I typed on the board over here. And let's call it C. Oops. And the number 4. Okay, so no errors or anything, but now let's actually try to access B and see what happens. Well, no, because I actually stored an actual JSON object there. So you don't always have to create something as a string. You can actually, if you're inside JavaScript, you can just make the object right out.
Oh, okay.
It's as if you created a string and then you parsed it. You don't always have to go through that step because you're in JavaScript. You can just use the object right away. You can just use the actual JSON object straight out. Oops, I should have actually typed something in there. Okay, so then we'll do JSON, and we'll access index B, basically. So it's going to grab C4. Now, what if you want to try to grab the value inside 4? Well, it's actually just as easy as doing that. You just continue to add the little square brackets on the end of that thing. Now, there's probably a more elegant way to do that, but if you're scripting or doing something, sometimes that's perfect, but that works. It doesn't
work if you did C.
If you just went to C without using B at all, it won't. But let me show you what happens. I mean, it's basically just going to error out. And I'll tell you, it's looking at the very top of the JSON object and it's working its way down. So it needs to know what the top element is, and then it can look inside that element. It's like, okay, now we have this. It's kind of like a file system.
Yeah, where I'm looking for a user, but I'm not root. I can't get to jump there. You have to go to home first and then get to that.
Yeah, so you've got like your Andrew Austin user on your system. You're like, well, I want to go to this folder, but I don't want to have to go through root. Well, you have to go through root first, then you have to go through home, and then you can get to your thing. You can't just generally go straight there. So it's the same sort of idea. It's a hierarchy. You have to kind of work through it. And the way I just did this with the example I did on screen, you can do the same thing with a standard array, 0, 1, 5, blah, blah, blah. And then the way you can access that is you just use a standard integer index right there in square brackets when you're trying to access it like you would in pretty much every other programming language you've ever used. So JSON's really cool. Get to know it. I mean, whether you like it or not, get to know it because it's really, really important and it's everywhere. And it's only becoming more and more standardized in everything. So yeah, does JSON make a little bit more sense now? Okay, so now we'll go back to JSON Parse and JSON Stringify. So Parse takes a string and turns it into a JSON object. JSON Stringify does the exact opposite thing. It takes a JSON string, a JSON object and turns it into a JSON string. Now you might be asking, why would that be important? Well, remember I was talking about if you wanted to send some data across the internet to a server or something and you wanted it to be formatted in the JSON format, that's the way you need to do it. You need to turn it into a string so that you can actually send it out that way.
And then when it receives it, it has to parse it so then it could actually run it.
Yes, so so whatever the language the server was running, if it was Python, if it was a Node.js server, or anything else, PHP, all of these text and can take in text, but then there needs to be there needs to be a library as a part of PHP or Python or Node.js to then parse the string and turn it into a JSON-like object or a data type that the language knows how to use so you can go through the object and grab the values out. Does that make sense? Okay. And most languages have a data type that is very similar to this. Now, Python has dictionaries, and dictionaries you can nest things inside just like JSON, and so it's very much the same thing. In fact, the term dictionary, JSON object inside JavaScript is essentially a dictionary. You can use those terms really interchangeably. Pardon me. And as far as PHP goes, I believe PHP has a very similar construct. I mean, it might even call the dictionary inside PHP. I just haven't used PHP in so long because I just don't like it very much. So it takes a string, turns it into a JSON object. Stringify takes a JSON object and turns it into a string. So it basically does the opposite things. Now that you kind of understand the theory and concepts behind everything, how is that actually useful in actual application? So yeah, I have my little example up here, my little Madonna example again. I don't have my code window up anymore, or my source window. So I'll pop that open again. Okay, so the local store, I'll actually highlight it on the screen for you guys so you can see it a little bit better. So we were talking about local storage a little bit at the beginning. Now, local storage can only store strings. It can't store objects. If you try to store a JavaScript object in using the local storage little method call that I did right there, so local storage.setItem, it's basically going to just retrieve, if you try to retrieve that information using getItem, it's just going to say an object is stored here with value object, which that doesn't really help. Doesn't give you any information. So what you need to do is you need to store all of the information that you want to store. So let's say you want to store this Madonna object that I created up here. And I've stored 3 different informational values. So I have song, which is a string, pose, which is a string, and husband, which is a string. Now, I can store each one of those values individually in their own separate local storage spots, which is, it won't work. It's just clunky and gross. But what I could do instead is I could store all of those values together as a part of the same object. And the way we can do that is we can store it in a JSON formatted string. So then what I do is I take the Madonna object that we created in the new favorites function, and I use JSON Stringify to take a JSON object and turn it into a JSON string. And then what I can do is I can store that JSON string using the set item as a part of local storage, and I can store that JSON string. Then later, what I can do in the get that Madonna function, I can use the get item method to retrieve whatever we've stored inside local storage. And then I can use JSON Parse to turn the JSON string back into a JSON object and do stuff with it. So yeah, that's pretty much all 3 of those concepts in the same deal. Any questions on any of the concepts? Okay, so there's one extra thing I'll add since I kind of started talking about local storage today as well. There's local storage, and then there's also session storage. Now, session storage only stores your information for as long as the tab or your window is open. Once you close your tab or your window, it deletes whatever information you stored. I'm not 100% sure what the use of that is. If your tab closes, why would you just store the information in memory? Why would you need to use session storage at all? I haven't really looked into it too deeply to see what the applications for that would be. But most people just use local storage, and local storage you're able to store it, and it's persistent through closing your tab and possibly even closing your browser. I haven't tried that out yet, but it probably will work the same way. And again, it'll kind of work like cookies, like when you log into a website and it just kind of still knows who you are from the last time you logged in. Now, there's, I guess, one more thing since we were talking about local storage a little bit, and I'll actually go to the page for it. Pardon me. Actually, I think I've got it open in, I won't go digging for it. Local storage. Technically HTML5. Okay. Oh, this isn't the one that I want. I will just go into the down storage guide. I'll find the one that I had open. Oh, I'm going a little too far there. Oh, here we go. Storage. Crap, where Where is it? That one method. Oh, okay. It's easier than I thought because I thought it was something else. Okay. So naturally, there's one more thing that we need to figure out how to do. We know how to set an item inside local storage. We know how to get an item inside local storage, but we also need to know how to remove it so we're not just taking up space. We're not really taking up much space because you're storing text. But it's more of possibly more of a security thing, or maybe you don't want it to affect the run of your website in future iterations because you're still storing data that's related to an old session or something. So remove item is the method that you want to use to actually remove something at the specific key that you have it at. So yeah, that was the very last thing. I forgot what the method was actually called. Okay, now does anybody have any questions about anything? I guess I gotta ask that one last thing.
So if I get this, I can get all the data that I stored on your
Just at the key value that you push into the method as an argument. So it's not going to remove everything, but it's going to remove whatever key you put in there. So I stored something with the Madonna key. If I put remove item with the Madonna key, I'm going to remove that item out of local storage, and then it won't be here anymore, and then I can reset it and do whatever else with it. So, yeah. Yeah, so not super complicated. A local storage, really, there's only 3 methods that you really are ever going to use: set item, get item, remove item, and they're all super simple to use. Caveat, just make sure you understand you can only really store strings in using this local storage method. You can't store objects inside there. If you want to store an object, you have to turn that object into a JSON string, for example, and then you can store the JSON string. Okay, and then I guess we're just kind of bullet pointing everything we've gone over. And then JSON Parse, taking a string, turning it into a JSON object. JSON Stringify, taking a JSON object and turning it into a JSON string. So basically, they both do the same thing, but in reverse. But the inverse inverses of one another, I guess I should say. So, all right. If there are no other questions, then that's pretty much it. Just making some noise to make sure the little sound meter is still going. Phew.